MAC address. We are taking a question and answer on MAC address. This comes under computer networks. The first question is hardware address is known as. We are talking about MAC address, so we know that hardware address will be MAC address. These are the options in front of you. So the option number 1, which is A, MAC address, is true because IP address is more of a software address. Network interface card is this one which I am showing you. Address resolution protocol is a protocol for IP to MAC. So this network interface card already has a number fixed while the manufacturing is done. So this number is already there. So that is why we call it as a hardwired address. So hardware address. Okay. Now one more thing here is this ARP. What happens, the difference between the hardware address and IP address is that this is your house, you and your brother. Now this is a router which is a box. Now whenever the packet is coming, the packet is locating you through the router. That is at the network layer. So IP address is the location, internet protocol address. So that is the network layer protocol. But in order to know you personally that this is the computer where the data should go, or the packet should go, that can be only ascertained using the MAC address. Because MAC address is the address in the NIC card, which is already fixed, which cannot be changed anywhere. Next is MAC stands for. So MAC stands for, the answer here is D, which is media access control. So this media access control, MAC stands for this only. So from where it has come, I'll just explain that. So before that, MAC stands for media access control. And not only this is only the acronym, but this MAC address is also called as physical address. It is called as a hardware address. And because it cannot be changed. Once the MAC address is given by say Cisco or Belkin or say Google, it can never change. So that is why we also call it as a hardware address, or the company which has already bound this address into the network interface card, which is called the BIA, bound in address. So the MAC stands for media access control, D. So I was talking about the layers. Why it is called MAC? See, in the ISO OSI layer, we have APST NDP, that is application, presentation, session, and then transport, then network, and then data link, and then the final physical layer. So you have to come to that data link layer, one layer above physical layer, or you can say the second last layer from top to bottom in the ISO OSI. So this DLL has, actually MAC is more closer to these DLL because this is more closer to the physical layer. And if you go to the network layer, IP will work. So IP is more towards the network layer, MAC is more towards the DLL. And this the last but one, the layer which in the ISO OSI model we take. Now what translates IP address into MAC address? So these are the options. If you know, please comment or let me know that you know this answer. But for those who want to understand, what translate IP address into MAC address? This question is very misleading actually. Actually there is no translation of IP address to MAC address is done. ARP, that is the address resolution protocol, is only getting the MAC address of a host whose IP is already known. Alright. So in a computer or a host, there will be a network interface card. That is how you'll get contacted to the communication host, other host. So here you have the MAC address which you see here. These are called colon separated. It can be dot separated. It can be the dash separated. So the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So these are the 6 different octet. Octet means 8-bit. So 8 into 6 is 48-bit it is. And the representation is hexadecimal. Alright. Now what happens here is that I have my IP, my MAC. I want to communicate it with some host, say some other host. So I know the IP of myself. I know the IP of the host. I know the MAC address, of course. I have to know my MAC address, get MAC or, get this IP config I can always do. But the MAC address of the other host is not known. So if you don't know the MAC address, you cannot send the packet. Alright. So in order to know the destination MAC ID, if its IP is known, then the ARP protocol is used. ARP protocol is all about sending the ARP discovery packet with my IP, my MAC, and your IP with know your MAC. In order to know your MAC, I send FF like this. That is, this will be a broadcast. It will be sent to every other host in the network. But the IP corresponds to your host. So you will only take that ARP packet or message, and then you will send the ARP reply with your MAC address on board. That is, I will know your MAC while knowing your IP through the ARP return message. So that will be a unique ask message from the destination to the source. So there is no conversion actually. Knowing the MAC, if the IP is known, is the work of this address resolution protocol, ARP protocol. So there is no conversion, there is no translation. It is only to know about that MAC address if IP is known. So this MAC address, let me tell you again, MAC address is a hardwired address, and IP is a more software-based address. Next is networking hardware address is referred with. So this is MAC address only. Hardware address because it is already hardwired. Where it is hardwired? On NIC. What is NIC? NIC is the network interfacing card which is present in almost all the hosts to network to get connected to other network. Okay, so this is also called as a physical address or burnt in address. This address which you see here is, if you talk about ISO-SI, I just told you that above physical there is a DLL layer. And this layer actually all the protocols work with the MAC address. And if you go over it, that is network layer, all will be worked with IP address. MAC addresses are very useful in diagnosing network issues. Now the question is true. Why? Because this MAC address is mainly for communication. This is a fixed number. It is a 48-bit number, hexadecimal number, and we have 6 octet. It can be separated by a colon, it can be separated by a dot or a period or a dash. So these all formats are there, different depending upon different companies and different operating system. Alright? But MAC address is why it is used for diagnosing the network issues. Because if you are able to get the IP but you are not able to get the MAC, that is, there is a problem with the NIC card. Alright? So in order to uniquely identify any system, first you have to locate it, that is done by the IP. Then you have to identify it, that is done by the MAC address. So for example, you want to check the NIC of your system, whether it is working fine or not, or your TCP/IP protocol stack. Then you just send ping 127.0.0.1. Okay, so that packet will start and end to your system only. It will never leave your system anyways, anyhow. So you are able to check a network interface card. This is a network issue. So you can diagnose your network issues using the MAC addresses. And the best part is the IP addresses can be changed. It is software defined. You can manually give it. You can get it from the DHCP server. But MAC address is always fixed. Wherever you take your laptop or a computer or a host, it will always be there wherever in any part of your world you go. That is why you can always diagnose the network issues using the MAC address. On wireless networks, dash filtering is the security measure. Now, of course, the answer would be MAC. We are discussing MAC. But what is the reason? What is the reason? See, MAC, talk about ARP. You know your IP, you know your MAC, you want to know the MAC of a known IP. That is a different host. The IP is known, but you want the MAC address. You send the ARP packet, get the ARP packet with a MAC on board, right? But the thing is, sometimes you are working in an organization. Sometimes you are working, let us take a very naive example that you are in the United States. You are a network administrator. You know that something is coming from China or something is coming from any country which is, the host is at some country where you are getting some dubious activity or bombardment of packets or denial of service, whatever is happening. So what you can do is, you know the MAC ID. If you know the MAC ID of that system, you can always filter it. For example, there is a system in Congo, and it is sending some dubious and unknown and harmful kind of stuff to your system or your network. What you can do? Taking the security measure into account, you can always filter that MAC. If you know the MAC, you can just say, I don't want any message or any communication from this MAC ID, a computer with this MAC ID, because MAC ID is fixed. IP can be changed. You can use VPN always. If you want to get app or website from any other country which is banned in your country, you can use VPN, right? So that is why the security measure becomes very important. So any hacker, any intruder, the MAC ID is known, so that can be MAC filtered. That is filtering using the MAC address. Alright. So this is the specific MAC address filtering is possible on wireless networks. MAC filtering is the security issue. MAC addresses are used as, there are certain options, and the answer is network addresses. Why? MAC addresses are known as physical address. It can be burned address. So MAC addresses is used as a network address for most IEEE 802 networking technologies. So I'm just showing you ARP's -A. That command you can always use. You'll see that what all internet IP addresses corresponding to their physical address is known to you. So that is why I'm saying that MAC address is used as a network address for most IEEE 802 network technologies, including Ethernet and Wi-Fi. So logically, if you say MAC addresses are used in the media access control protocol sublayer of the OSI model. So MAC addresses are used as the network address because that is how you network, that is how you send the packet. Not only knowing the IP will do the service. You need to have a combination of IP along with MAC in order to get network in a communication network, in a computer network. IEEE stands for Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Now, IEEE is a governing body. It also creates the standards. So you can always change the question like this. IEEE stands for or IEEE standards, whichever you want. But you know the idea. IEEE is what? It is Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. So why we're discussing this IEEE in MAC context? We're discussing MAC addresses, right? So this is a MAC address. Now how do you get the MAC addresses? And how can you say this MAC address is unique all over the world? So the answer is IEEE. So the MAC addresses prefixes, which are the first 8 bits, which is the 24 bits, these 3 MAC prefixes are assigned to each organization or a vendor by whom? IEEE Registration Authority Committee. So whole is 48 bit, first 24 is OUI. I'm giving an example also. So this 24 bit is fixed. It is given by IEEE. The other 24 bits you can always give, like the Cisco will give its own way. The Google will give some more 24 bits number. So combination of this 24 and 24, that is a vendor and then vendor specific, that can combinedly said as a proper unique MAC ID. Alright. So manufacturers can use any sequence of digit to NIC specific digit, but the prefix should be same as given by whom? IEEE Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. So the answer here is B, which is true. So MAC addresses are formed according to the rules of one of the 3 numbering namespaces managed by Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. All these 3 is 24-bit, 888. The original IEEE 802 MAC addresses comes from where? See, these MAC addresses or anything per se, everything has come from very minute developments, experimentation, and finally a thing has come which is now used everywhere. For example, C language. Do you know that it has B also and A also? Then we started calling it C, and then came the C++ like that. Okay. So things have come like that, and 802 MAC addresses are also coming from somewhere, being adapted from somewhere. So the answer here is C, Ethernet address. Now you'll be saying, why Ethernet address? Why this IEEE 802 MAC address, which is a unique address, is called the Ethernet address, and it is come from where? From Xerox. Which Xerox? This original IEEE 802 MAC addresses, it has come from the original Xerox Ethernet addressing system. Xerox Ethernet addressing system. And this 48-bit address space, it contains the potential 242, or there is a possibility of multiple MAC addresses. Because if you have say 48-bit MAC address, so how many addresses are possible? 2 to the power 48. But you need to remember that the first 3 octet is already reserved for whom? For the vendors. Other 24-bit are specially for the Macs. For the Mac, okay, for the vendors to give that 24-bit. Alright. So this is all about this discussion. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.